Welcome, everyone, to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Reardon, and I'll be your coach this evening. So, Mondays are a day that I actually am beginning to love even more. I know some people hate Mondays, and they always say, oh, Monday, I have to go to work. And if you have a 9 to 5, probably, and you just don't like Mondays. So, but for me, Mondays are very special because that's the day my blog comes out. And I love to talk about them because it's something I believe in. It's something that I know helps people. And the content, the information, whatever you want to call it, is going to be valuable for anyone who's looking for change or who's looking for a different result in their life. And today we're going to be talking about blame versus responsibility. And when we look at both, whether it be blame or responsibility, who are you? Are you the type of person to blame others? Are you the type of person to take responsibility even if it's not your fault? And I understand it's not your responsibility to take someone else's fault, but at the same time, if someone is slandering your name, do you have to defend yourself or do you allow it? And in our world and in our society, people are so quick to have to defend themselves. They feel that I have to defend myself if I want things to work out in my favor. So people who are able to not let other people influence them in the sense of, oh, they're blaming me for this and I'm not supposed to be taking responsibility, and they just let it slide. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And from experience, I do not need to fix someone else's problems. So if someone blames me for an issue, even if it's not my fault, I go, okay, not a problem, right? Because I know I have my day in court. I know I'll have another opportunity to show them I was always in the right, or for them to realize that I'm not that type of person. So your character, your personality should be someone or should be a resemblance of, if someone talks bad about you, let's say you're in a room and you're in a room and then someone in the other room is talking bad about you. All the people who are listening, if you have made a good enough impression where they can understand your character and who you are as a person, they're going to look at the person slandering your name like you're wrong. And they're going to let them know that you're wrong. They're going to say, oh, not him. People will say, not Mike. That's not like him. Because they know me. Because the character is there. Because the responsibility is there. So when you blame someone, that is just putting tarnish on your character. Because then it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually, they stop believing in him. So we're going to get into the blog. Let's break it down a little bit. So let's head over to revenconcepts.com. So we head over to revenconcepts.com. Of course, if it's your first time, head over to enter website, go over to resources, and then we're going over to the blog tab. And we're going to hit blame versus responsibility because that is the blog that aired or came out today. And I want to talk to you about an Instagram post that I had put out. And the Instagram post was simply saying that if you viewed the world as you did at the age of 20, the same as 40, have you wasted your life? And people, they came on and they interacted and they commented and they said, when I was 20, I had a better outlook on life, but now not so much. So if you are living in 2020, 2021, and you are 40 at that point, how do you feel? Do you feel hopeful to the future? Do you feel like there's going to be prosperity and wealth in your life? Or is it all uncertain? Is it all a mismatch of information, of lies, of deceit? That's important to understand. Because if you were 20 years prior, so it'll be the year 2000, how were you living? Were you happy? Were you smiling? Were you doing everything that needed to be done? And many people say that when they were 20, they had a better outlook on life. And it's not so much because of COVID. It's because of their own circumstances. They're blaming a pandemic. They're blaming a government. They're blaming the system for their detriments, for their downfalls, for their failures. But it's not about picking sides. It's not about saying who's to blame. It's about understanding where the responsibility lies. Because at the end of the day, who's in charge of you? And if you're married, maybe your wife is. But if you're an independent woman or man, then you are the person who's going to be in charge. You're going to be the person who depicts how your day is going to start and finish. And whatever happens in between, how you feel about it is going to be up to you. Because people can control your thoughts for only so long. They can influence actions, but they cannot control them. But what we believe, truly, that's for us. And people have forgotten that. People have forgotten that they are responsible for themselves. That if they want to be rich or wealthy or famous, it is them who makes that happen. And of course, yes, you might have people who are going to be able to get ahead sooner or quicker because of established connections, maybe of your upbringing, your environment. You might be at the right place at the right time. And your life is going to be totally different than someone who is at the wrong place at the right time. So you just have to understand that what happens past today, it is now your responsibility. But we have to look at the blame part too. Because we are living in a world where society is telling us that it is okay to put off our troubles, our concerns, all our issues onto someone else. So we can say, oh, the business is failing because of the pandemic. And rightfully so, right? The government came and said, everyone stay inside. And unless you're an essential worker, you cannot go to work. So people did lose their livelihoods. Who's to blame? Yes, we can say it was the government's fault because they closed everything down. We can say it's the coronavirus's fault because it escaped the lab and started killing people. I mean, we can do that. But let's look at the other side, the side of responsibility. And I understand if you just started off your business, you might not have much capital in the beginning. But let's pretend you had an established restaurant. Now this restaurant's been around for 50 years, and maybe you were just struggling or scraping by for those 50 years. But on that 50th year, the pandemic hit, and now you are faced with either closing the doors or continue to scrape by. And it's going to be a lot more difficult at this point because now there's going to be restrictions. There's going to be weights tied to your ankles, to your legs. How do we get past that type of belief? How do we get past I have been struggling all this time and I have a new struggle and it's finally too much for me to handle. Well, why did you struggle for 50 years? What went on in those 50 years that required you to struggle so much? People fail to take heed and to take notice of their planning. Because if you're planning, you see what works and what doesn't. One of my mentors, she told me that every 3 months, you should be looking at what you did the past 3 months and seeing what worked and what didn't. And if you want to repeat what happened, you just continue with those 3 months. And if you don't want to see what happens, or you don't want that repeat to happen again, you do not repeat those 3 months. You change it up, you pivot, you make a new plan. And for people who are scraping by, either you're not good at planning or you just have to pivot. And that's where people fail. And that's where the blame comes in. People will blame someone for something bad happening in their life instead of taking responsibility. Because taking responsibility is as easy as saying, yes, I did it. No, I did not do everything I needed to do. Because if my business fails, that's on me. I'm not going to blame a pandemic. I'm not going to blame a friend or someone in my family. That's not their weight. That's mine. People fail to see that the choices they make influence your life. So if you're blaming, if you're saying that you're the victim, if you're saying that the past was better than the future, why is that so? People are failing to take action. They're becoming more docile. And when you become more docile, you take less action. Because the actions that need to be taken, especially when blame is underway, is responsibility. And people fail to understand that responsibility is important. So this blog breaks down blame versus responsibility. Definitely a good read. I'm going to be talking about it some more, but it's a read I recommend highly. So let's get back into the video with just me. And we're going to talk a little bit more about blame and responsibility. So blame and responsibility is going to be something that you either grew up with or you have to learn as an adult. For people who grew up in a privileged household, maybe they were able to blame someone, blame something. The wind did it, the dog did it, my sister did it, et cetera, et cetera. And what that did or does to a person is create a habit. Now they have a habit of blaming, but they also have a habit of making excuses. So their excuse for not being more than what they are or making sure things went well is something made up. And it's interesting how people can live behind their excuses, can live behind blaming someone for wrongdoing or for a fault. It's almost as I don't have to be an adult anymore. I can just blame someone else and I can feel better. I'm going to sleep well at night because I'm going to blame someone else for my wrongdoing. And it's easy to blame. It's easy to make excuses. But you know what's challenging and what's difficult? Being responsible. But what's the difference? Right? What's the difference between blaming and being responsible? Can I just blame my whole life away and make excuses? Yes, you can. But how far would you go blaming and making excuses? Maybe you might go the mile. Maybe you don't go too far. And I have learned from a young age to be responsible. If I did something, own it. If I failed, own it. But it wasn't easy. Being responsible and taking the heat is something you have to get used to. And it's important to understand the premise of if it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. Because if you're not able to make a mistake and own it, what are you doing? Let's say you are a chef. You make the food too salty. Own it. You know what that does? It makes you a better chef because now your next meal, your next dish is not going to be salty. It might not be as salty, right? You are perfecting your craft. But if I take the road of blame, oh yeah, the salt container broke, or my sous chef didn't know what they were doing and they added too much salt. That's not what a leader does. A leader is going to take responsibility regardless. A leader is going to say, hey, this needs to be fixed. That's on me for letting it happen in the first place. And the person who did it might be apologetic and say, I'm really sorry about this. And you can reprimand them and yell at them, say, don't let it happen again, or you're fired. You can be that type of person. But what if you were a different type of person? Hey, we all make mistakes. I was in your shoes once before. Let's learn from this mistake and let's make it better, etc. There's two sides to the story. Can you do it? Can you not do it? And some people can't do it, and that's fine. And you let them go. But for the people who are eager, the people who are learning and are willing to make things happen, that's going to be important to keep them, to nurture them. And recently for me, I guess I went on a hire frenzy, started hiring everyone. And it's because the business is growing. And I'm only one man and I cannot do everything. As much as I would like to do everything, I cannot. So I can blame myself. I can blame my workers for not getting something done on time, for not getting something done to the standard I'm looking to have it done. I can blame them. Or I can be a teacher and I can teach people what is needed to succeed. I could be a responsible adult. I can be a responsible teacher. I can be a responsible leader. And leadership is very important because I have been a part of companies where the leadership was really good, but then again, there was something lacking. You had an individual you can look up to. You had someone you can aspire to be. But then at the same time, they had something inside of them that wasn't going to resonate with you. And it's difficult to find a job or a career where you're going to get that exact match with your coworkers and your leaders. That's why so many careers you might jump from job to job because you're looking for the right fit. Because in corporate America, it's about synergy. Can the team work well together? And what type of environment are you working in? Because if you're working in a negative and pessimistic environment, it might not be good long term. Maybe if you're that type of person and you feel right at home. But if you're a person who wants to see growth, who wants to see a better tomorrow, a place like that's not going to work for you. So what type of place will work for you? And that's going to be some place that accepts You're new. You're going to fail. We're human. We're going to fail. But own it when you fail. People have forgotten how to take responsibility. Look at our current administration. They're constantly defending themselves. And it's not about being under attack. It's because if they do not defend themselves, the truth will be front and center. Because if they're not going to lie or make an excuse or blame someone else, all eyes are on them. So is it wrong? Is it something that can be changed? Possibly, right? But it won't. When's the last time you had a leader come out and say, hey, that was my fault. That was my bad. Doesn't happen quite as needed because people make mistakes. We're human. But we learn from our mistakes. And I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for them to plead for forgiveness. I'm just simply saying how you report anything that's going on. Are you blaming people? Are you telling people that they're the problem? Because they're not. You don't control people. No one's your slave. But then again, they tell you what to do. I think it was Joe Biden. He had a video on CNN, of course, of all news places. And he was talking about freedom. Freedom. Ha ha ha. And the audience was laughing. They were laughing at freedom. And I understand the other side because I can always see both sides. The other side is laughing because the right talk about freedom quite consistently. I'm free. I can do what I want. This is the First Amendment. I got freedom of speech. This is Second Amendment. I have a right to carry my firearm, et cetera, et cetera. And they laugh. But what would happen if the freedom was taken away? What would happen if we told them that now everything you do, we're going to blame you because what you're doing is wrong? So remember this day because the blame is going to be on you. Sadly, that day might not come, but we can do something about it. We can change our mindsets. We can change the way we think, the way we operate, because regardless of how they operate, how they want to be, that doesn't mean we need to be the same way as them. Doesn't mean we need to be the same way as anyone we do not want to be. So determine who you want to be and start to become that person. Do you want to be a person who lives blaming each other, blaming people for no reason? Or do you want to be a person who takes responsibility, who acts like a leader? That's the type of person I can get behind. That's the type of person I strive to be. And I can remember several times growing up, several times in my working career where the blame was on me. And I took the responsibility. And there was times when I could have lied and said someone else did it and it's not my fault. There's many times I could have did that. But I took the blame. I took responsibility. And I watched what went next, what happened next, because that says more about a person than simply saying, oh, you took responsibility. I respect that. How do they treat you after? That's important. Because if you made a mistake and they treat you inferior, if they start to neglect you, then that place was never for you. And you can have a wonderful boss, a wonderful career, a wonderful life, but that doesn't mean you have to accept anything less than what you deserve. And it's important to get past that point of needing people, because if you can operate efficiently by yourself, the people who you need in your life are going to gravitate toward you. When you're positive, when you have a strong, healthy mindset, they're going to gravitate toward you, not the other way around. We're not trying to tell people, hey, you need to follow me because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. I don't need scare tactics. When I walk, people follow. And it's not because they don't have a choice. It's because they choose to follow. So this blog, Blame versus Responsibility, a must read, because it's going to not only break it down how people blame, why people blame, but how to implement taking responsibility. And if that's something you struggle on, you can always head over to the website, get a consultation with me, and we can figure out what's really going on. Because I understand the world is in a tailspin right now, where it's not only about what can be done or what will be done, but what needs to be done. And we need to figure out what needs to be done in our life. We don't need to be worried about our neighbor. We don't need to be worried about our friends. We need to be worried about ourselves. And are we taking responsibility in our own life? Because if we have enough people take responsibility for themselves, how would that change the world? It's going to change it drastically. And people need to realize that. It's not about blaming and getting away scot-free. Take responsibility where it needs to be taken. And even if you're looked down at, understand that when they're looking down on you, they're not saying you're inferior. They're saying he was an honest man. He was an honest woman. He was an honest person. And that's important, because your integrity and your character is worth more than being right. I'll be wrong every single day of the week if I knew my character can remain intact. Because the type of person I am is for you to decide. I can't tell you that I'm this type of person and then you say, oh yeah, you're exactly that type of person. You decide. Watch my videos, talk to me, listen to me. And I always find it funny where people label someone, whether it be a racist, a leftist, or a far right person, a gun Nazi, whatever, right? They label someone without even knowing them. Just because they have a certain demeanor or a certain fact, they say these derogatory things about someone. And it's easy to blame. It's easy to yell. It's easy to point the finger. But let's turn it around. If something is going wrong in your life, don't point the finger at anyone else or any other thing. Look in the mirror and point it at yourself. And watch what happens next in your life. My name is Michael Reardon. If you have any coaching questions, if you have any need for coaching, of course, head over to revenconcepts.com. If you have any questions for the podcast, email me at coachinginsession@gmail.com. If you haven't and you're new, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the video. Always appreciate it. Make sure sharing is caring. And I will see you again on Wednesday, Central Standard Time, for the workshop. And this one is going to be about our fitness routines And the fitness routines is going to end our month of fitness. And then after, we're going to go back into mindset. We're going to get some more mindset coaches in, because for some reason, it's easy to get mindset coaches. It's easy to get coaches who have an optimistic view. But when I need a coach on diet or on dating, it's a lot more difficult. And it's not because that they're not available. It's because they have a different mindset. And for the people who live abundantly, it is a lot simpler to get them on. It's easier to interview them, and it's easier to get quality information, because this podcast is not for me to sell to you. It's for anyone who has something to say, for people who have questions, for people who have a purpose and they want to relay their message, to be an avenue for that. So let's continue to make that happen. Let's continue to grow and become better. So I will see you Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, sharp.